Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. All right, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest wishes to keep his identity anonymous. Because of that, we're just going to call him Angus. Angus, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for your time and coming on. We appreciate it. Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm 51 years old. I live in the greater Chicagoland area. I was born and raised in West Virginia. Grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I'm very familiar with nature. I come from a military family. So I'm not unfamiliar with guns and weapons. Love to hunt. And I'm very familiar with most things that would walk or crawl in the woods.
From what I understand, you haven't slept a wink since we talked about your encounter last night. Please expand on that for us.
Yeah, when you tend to talk about things, it brings the event closer to the surface than I've had it in a very long time. This event I pushed down and forgotten about for years, simply because I didn't know who to talk to or where to get information from. So when it comes to the surface like that, it's very hard for me to sleep because I just I know what's coming, or the nightmares that come after that. And that's not the only nightmare that I have that's reoccurring. I have others, but it's no fun when any of them come up. So I just expect for the worst after I'm talking about stuff like this. But fortunately for me, I made appointments with my therapist and my psychologist. I see them tomorrow. So talking about it and then trying to go to bed again is going to be a little easier knowing that I've got somebody to talk to when I hit their offices tomorrow.
You mentioned talking to them to try and get some resolution on this. Were you going to let them know about your encounter or just let them know that you have PTSD-related issues that are keeping you up?
I haven't spoken to either one of them about this. It's just I have good relationships with both of them. I think both of them are my friend. And I've tried telling this to a friend before, and all I got was an expected chuckle. So, you just don't talk about it. When you don't know where to get your answers from, you just wait and see. And fortunately, I waited and I found your show and listened to a couple of your guests, and it helped me realize that other people have seen stuff like this. And what I saw that I tried to pretty much suppress and forget as a typical missighting was something that I did see.
I just mentioned the PTSD you suffer from. You suffer from PTSD because of your experiences in the military. Did your PTSD resurface while you were in the middle of your encounter?
The event was many things, and all of it rolled together was something else that I hope I never experience again. But the one moment that really brought terror to me was when I heard it, when it made a distinct noise. And that brought a reaction out of me that I hadn't had in years, decades. And to have that draw that out of me at the same time was really uncomfortable. That took it, like you said, it took it to a new level. And it was a little harder to deal with up front.
Well, I can understand why it would be. Your friend's brother invited you to go on a hunting trip to an area in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and that's where you had your encounter. Had you ever been to that area before?
No, I've been up into Quebec for fishing, but I've never been up into the Upper Peninsula. I always wanted to because I've heard it's such a beautiful country and there's such diverse wildlife that's up there that you can't see in a lot of the states in the lower 48. So I was anxious to go when I was given the opportunity. I was all for it. But the only thing that would hinder me on that trip would be my hip. This was before my first hip implant, and the hip was progressively getting worse and worse. And my brother's friend, that was my friend that was going up there with, was concerned how much actually hunting I was going to be able to do. But I was very happy to disappoint him.
Well, I can understand why. It really is a shame considering how much you were looking forward to that trip that it all went to pot because of that encounter you had. All right, Angus, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
We got there the first day, and we had unpacked in a Jayco pop-up camper, so we had to set up the camp, get the camper set up. While my friend was getting the camper set up, I was getting the rest of the campsite taken care of with, clearing of the leaves and getting all the, branches that had fallen, cleared them out from the fire pit area and just cleaning up. We had gotten there too late to go set up the camp and go hunting that evening. So we just decided we'll set out early in the next morning. And it was beautiful for me to be back out in the wilderness. Being in the greater Chicagoland area now and living here for decades and being away from West Virginia, it was nice to reconnect with nature. And the first night, I honestly had the best night's sleep I had had in years, listening to the sound of the forest that put me to sleep. But that next morning when we woke up, there had been a light rain. So the ground was a little wet. There were little puddles that had formed, and nothing that was going to stop us from going hunting. We had eaten a hearty breakfast, and we set out for what was going to be a long day walking the trails. So we go out and we tried this one trail, and it was quiet. We couldn't stir up anything, and we were talking loud. We're trying to get grouse is what we're hunting. So we've got bird shot in our shotguns, an 8. I think my friend had a 9. And we're making as much noise as you need to make to stir the birds up. As we're walking along, Cashley, we're probably 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles into the trail. And I'm covering the left side of the trail, and my buddy's covering the right side of the trail. And the trail's really just an ATV trail, and we're walking in the paths of the tire tracks. And on both sides of the path, it's a cleared forest with sparse trees for about 20 yards, maybe 30 yards on both sides of the trail. And then it goes into deeper brush that hadn't been forested. And we were just talking, and I glanced over to my left. I saw what first came to mind, because I've seen them before, was a bear. Now, I was just catching the last rear end of the bear. It's round behind, black as night, go into the deeper brush. And as I saw that, I said, "Hey, there goes a bear." And my buddy Dave says, "No, that wasn't a bear." And I said, "Yeah, I'm telling you what I saw." And he says, "Well, why don't you go over there and check it out and see if there's any sign?" And I said, "Yeah, you're going to get me to go walk into the brush after a black bear." I said, "It's not going to happen." So we just continued walking on. But when I saw that behind go into the thicker trees, there was just one thing nagging me, and it was a red flag that went off. Was the back of that bear it was on all four walking in to the deep brush was too high. The back of that bear, if it was a bear, was 4.5 to 5 feet tall. And that would have to be a monstrous black bear. I mean, if I was in a different set of woods and it was a brown bear, I'd just say, I just saw a brown bear. I just saw a grizzly, because the size was that big. The rest of it had to be equal to what I saw. It didn't alarm me because I was just telling myself it was a bear. It had to have been a bear. So with black bear, odds are you're never going to see it. It's going to hear you, smell you way before you get near to it, and it's going to be out of sight. Well, this one, like I said, it was just too big. I didn't know what else to think about that, so I just kept telling myself, no, it had to be a bear. It had to be a bear. I know there are black bear up here, and I'm familiar with what's in the woods that we're hunting. So we just continued on, walked another mile, maybe 1.5 miles. And I told my friend, I said, yeah, I'm going to need to take a break, buddy. Why don't you go ahead and continue on, and I'll wait right here and just make your way back over to me. So he said, yeah, no problem. He wanted to do a little more hunting, which I knew he would. So I found a nice, comfortable spot, took the round out of my chamber. I don't like having a loaded gun with a friend walking around out there. I don't want any accidents to happen. So I took the one out of the chamber and just put it back in my belt. So he's gone. He's been out of my sight for a good hour. And I'm watching the left side of the trail where I saw that black bear butt go into those trees. And I'm just looking, my head's kind of on a swivel. I'm just looking around. I'm listening for anything. And all of a sudden, on the right side of the trail, it was a noise. It was a loud boom and the breaking of a branch. It wasn't somebody walking through the woods carelessly making noise. It wasn't my buddy coming back in. It was very loud, and it broke a significant branch that cracked. It scared the daylights out of me that the same time I heard it, I had chambered around in the shotgun and had it up in the direction that I heard the noise from without even thinking. And what really scared me was when I chambered around and I heard it click in, I realized it was birdshot. And whatever made this noise that's in another 20 yards away from me in that heavy brush, it's not going to do a thing too. It's just going to piss it off, if anything. So I'm wanting to back up out of there, but I can't leave. I told Dave that I was going to be right here. So he was making his way back to me. So I waited there very impatiently for about 45 minutes, and I see him coming back virtually the same way. And he's not casually walking like he was when he was strolling off to continue the hunt. He was coming back at a pretty brisk pace. And the look I saw on his face, he looked how I felt. And he just said, let's get out of here. And I asked him, do you have any other ammunition for these shotguns? And he says, I have slugs back at the camp. And he said, let's go. And I agreed. We got out of there as fast as we could without making ourselves look like a target. And we made our way back to the truck. We both felt a sigh of relief when we saw the truck. We slowed down our pace and we start taking our gear off and unload the guns. We stored the guns in the truck. And then I go around to step back in the truck, and I looked down at a mud puddle I had stepped in when we had left, and there was a print over top of my boot print that was the biggest canine print I have ever seen in my life. I've seen big cat prints. I've seen cougar prints. I've seen bobcat. It was not a cat print. This thing was a canine, and the leg that paw had to be on had to have been a 4x4 post or bigger that left that print over my boot print. It was wider than my boot print and almost as long, not including the heel, from the heel forward, was almost as long, including the nails. And I called Dave around to take a look at this. He came over and saw that. And he just said again, let's get out of here. So we jumped in the truck and we hauled back to camp. And we decided that we're not going to go hunting in that area. If we go hunting again the next day, we were just happy to be out of there and happy to be back at camp where we felt relatively safe. We felt in comfortable grounds. So Dave goes to bed early. I stay up. I just kept the big fire going all night as long as I could. I just wanted to keep a big fire going. I went to bed about 2 a.m. I know it was before 3. And I slept with my shotgun loaded in reach because I was just that nervous. I mean, whatever that left that print, whatever made that noise was big. And we wake up around daybreak, around 7 o'clock, 7:30. And I'm stirring up around, and I get up. It was my turn to make breakfast, so I told him I'm going to go out and get breakfast going, then we'll talk about what we want to do from there. And I step out the trailer, and when I stepped out, I looked to my left, and not 10 feet from the trailer, not 10 feet from where my head was laying in that trailer, it was a carnage. We knew it was a turkey because of the feathers. We knew what turkey feathers looked like, and we just surmised it was a turkey. The only way we could tell that was because of the feathers. Other than that, it was just mutilated. I mean, meat torn, head removed, everything disemboweled, and was just made like a gigantic mess right beside our trailer. And I had Dave come out, and I said, come out here and take a look at this. And when he saw that, he must have been as white as I was, because we both looked at each other, and he said, I'm going to start breaking down the camper, break down the rest of the camp. We're going to get out of here in less than an hour. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a real good idea, because I don't understand how something could have gotten in our camp, been that close to me at night, and I'm on edge as it is, and I'm not sleeping well, and yet something did that right next to us. That scared the living crap out of me. I mean, it really scared the bejeebies out of me. So we packed up camp, record time. He leaves the camper there. We just, drive back in his truck. We tear the camp down and we head out of there. And he and I didn't speak the entire way home to each other. When we got to my house, I just grabbed my stuff that I had in the cab, and then I reached in the back, grabbed my gun and the bag and everything, and took my equipment out and just kind of nodded to him, and he took off. And actually that was the last time I spoke to him. We haven't reconnected. It was my brother's friend. So, somebody I didn't see on a normal day-to-day basis. And quite frankly, I haven't seen him since. Every now and then Dave would stop by on his way home because I lived in between his work and his home. And, we used to shoot the bull and talk about stuff. But I don't see him anymore. And I can't help but wonder what Dave saw that made him come back so fast and so eager. He had to have seen or heard or something to shake that man that I've never seen shaken like that before. We've been out hunting on numerous occasions for numerous things, and I've never known him to be shaken like that. Really, back then, didn't understand what it was. And without more information, I really didn't know who to ask for advice, because the minute you say werewolf or something of the nature, you're going to get people rolling their eyes at you. I never knew that it was a dogman or the potential of a wolf this size that could leave a track that big existed until I heard this show. So I'm very thankful, Vic, for the show and the show of support you've shown me.
Oh, you're welcome. That's what I'm here for. I'm just glad you found out about the show and what I do. You didn't get the best look at it, but please describe the creature you saw for us as accurately as you can from top to bottom.
It was walking away from me. It was on all four. It was black as night. It was 4.5 feet, if not 5 feet tall. And a black bear is maybe 4 feet tall on the back. Maybe. And that's a big one. For something to be this tall, I didn't see a tail. It was going away. That's why, again, I thought it was a black bear because of the color and the shape of what was disappearing into the woods. That's what I saw. And it just doesn't, I still can't convince myself that it was a bear. It was just too big, Vic. It was way too big.
Yeah, black bears don't get to be that big, even Boone and Crockett black bears. You told me that you wondered if something might have been watching you as you walked into the woods that day. Why is that?
When I was walking, when I went hunting, I was hurting. My left hip was on its way out, and a hip replacement was in my future. And I was really kind of prolonging it as long as I could take it. And I was limping very noticeably. And I just couldn't help but feel when I was walking out there and I'm limping this bad, I couldn't help but feel that something, if it was looking at both of us, I'm the one limping. I'm the one to take down first. And that really rang in my head after I heard the big noise, the big branch break. It just made me feel like something was definitely watching me. Something was paying attention. And I feel like that footprint left in the mud puddle backed by the truck was left on purpose. I mean, it was stamped right down on top of my footprint perfectly and left a perfect print. And then to have something slaughter a turkey or slaughter anything for that matter inside our camp like that felt like that was, I took that for what it was, for what I really saw. All of that adding up to meant get out. I was not welcome there. That's the impression I got. And that's really what motivated us to leave, was just any one of them, maybe just seeing the rear quarter of what I thought was a really big bear wouldn't have been enough. But then seeing the footprint, that really shook me. hearing the noise, maybe it was another bear. I remember I even shouted out, "Hey, bear," and I clapped real loud, thinking that maybe what I heard was a bear. Because when I was sitting there waiting for Dave to come back after I heard that noise and the power behind the thump, which it hit the ground, like I said, I wanted to get out of there, but I waiting for my friend and just realizing that something had possibly been following us the entire day. I felt like when I saw the turkey and the next morning, I felt like the same thing had followed us all the way back. And we were maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. I mean, it doesn't sound, it's not really a lot of distance, but the roads we took to get there was, kind of windy. And yeah, just the last thing I thought of when we left was I was going to find something like that in the morning.
If it's of any consolation, it wouldn't matter if you had a bad limp or no limp at all. If you're on their menu, then you're a target, and an easy one at that. You said Dave told you it wasn't a bear you two saw that day walking to the trees. Was he acting funny right after you saw it?
No, not really. I mean, he was jokingly, he made fun of the fact that I thought I saw a bear, that I would see something that big, that close to us. If anything, he was making light of it. So if anything, it made it a little easier for me to kind of brush it aside and really try to convince myself that what I saw was a bear.
Do you see there being any possibility that you really were looking at a black bear that day and simply grossly overestimated its size?
No way. I was only 20 yards away from it. And from where I saw that bear, the back of that was way too tall. It was almost as tall as I'm 5'8", and it was up to my shoulders. That's why when I saw, it had to be, Vic. Because it had to be in proportionate to what I saw. The piece of the puzzle I saw was this big, was almost 5 foot tall. So the rest of that thing in proportion had to be enormous. And there's no way it could have been a bear.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, with all of your experience and time in the woods, yeah, I've got no doubts that you would know if that was actually a bear, you'd know it. What kind of effect has that encounter had on your desire to head back into the woods now?
It's got me rethinking. It's definitely got me rethinking about going back in the woods, because I've always liked to think I'm somebody that goes, when I go somewhere, I go prepared. If it's fishing, if it's hunting, if it's whatever, you always go prepared. And before I step back into, if I ever go back to the Upper Peninsula, which I honestly, I don't see doing, but if I had to, better believe I'm going more prepared than I was last time.
Oh, I understand that. If you had another encounter someday, do you think that would be the straw that broke the camel's back and you'd be done ever going into the woods again?
I enjoy the woods too much, especially the woods that I grew up in back home. I never experienced anything like this. I never felt that feeling when I was sitting resting there on that log, and when I went to light my cigarette, and it sounded like the loudest thing I had ever done was strike the cigarette lighter. And it felt like to me like it echoed across the 20-yard spans from me to the trees. And I noticed then that it was just stone cold quiet. And with that, that's not a good thing, because that's normally the sign of a predator is around. So I just made as much noise as I could, just because I wanted anything that was out there. I wanted it to know I was right there. So if it was a bear, it wasn't going to come in looking for me. I've never seen a black bear do that. Not to say that they wouldn't, but one that has cubs, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a black bear to me either. Your grandkids are almost old enough to be into camping in the outdoors now. When they are interested in doing those things, how are you planning to handle it? Are you going to try to warn them?
That's a tough one. because after listening to some of your guests you've had on the show and listening to their encounters and what I went through, I mean, from what I went through, it sounded like, because I didn't actually see a whole animal. I'm only going on basing on everything that occurred. It would be hard to explain to a child that there are monsters out there. There is something out there that we just haven't put a label on or categorized yet, something that we failed to see. There's a lot of space out there. And from what I've heard and what I've seen, I can't deny it. There is something out there. And what was around me that day, I know right down to my core that it was a wolf. That print was undeniably a canine. And when it left it where it did, because when I saw that print, I went around the entire truck looking for any other sign, and there was nothing. I couldn't find anything. When I found what I found outside the camper that next morning, that turkey mutilation, I looked around the camp and I could not find any sign of anything entering our camp or leaving. This thing was intelligent, had an intelligence to it to know that someone would be looking for how it got so close, and it knew how to evade. So how do you look your grandchildren in the face if they ask if there's monsters out there and you say yes? That's going to terrify them. I don't want them growing up thinking like that. So I don't know. I'm probably not going to really mention it until they're old enough where they can make a decision based on what I'll tell them and what they believe themselves.
Yeah, that is a tough one. When the moment does come to make that decision, I'm sure you're going to make the right one. You said that you live in the Chicagoland area. Because of that, you told me that you think that precludes the chance of you having an encounter around your home. If I told you that Dogman sightings have been reported by credible eyewitnesses well within the city limits of major metropolitan areas, what would you have to say about that?
That's unsettling. That's unsettling to think. The neighborhood I live in, it used to be part of a forest that stretches from Illinois all the way down to Missouri. That it's one big corridor, and the houses that they threw up around my house is relatively new to animals that weren't here when they built these things. And the coyotes still wander up and down this corridor. So the time of year that they're usually up here, they're still here and they're just walking around houses. I saw one just the other day when I thought it was a neighbor's dog that got loose, but it was a pretty big coyote that was just strolling right through the neighborhood like he owned it.
Yeah, they do that. It's pretty hard to wrap your head around how they could come right into developed areas the way they do, but yeah, as you saw, they definitely do that. Now that you know about the show and all the other eyewitnesses who have had encounters of their own, do you listen to as many accounts as you can or try to avoid the topic like the plague?
I still listen. I listen to them, hoping to hear more things that are going to make me feel like, what I saw and what I went through, more of a confirmation. The more you hear, the more you know that you're not alone, that you haven't seen something that somebody else isn't going to understand. So it's kind of nice to know that somebody else out there understands what you've seen and that primal fear that thing drew out of you.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, the more you hammer home the fact that there are a lot of people out there who have experienced the same thing that you have, yeah, the easier it's going to be to deal with that encounter. So that all makes good sense. Are you a little angry that Dogman took away the innocence of the woods from you?
I was just a country boy. I'd put a string tied to my toe and fall asleep by the fishing hole. But now, no, I'm not going to be dozing by the fishing hole as lazily as I used to.
Yeah, now that you know what's really out there, I can understand why you wouldn't be able to do that again. Do you wish you didn't know they were out there, or are you glad that you do know they're out there so you can take the proper precautions?
That would be correct. Yeah, just so I could take the appropriate precautions. I'm glad that I do know that they are out there, so that if I do have to go into an area where an encounter has happened, or likely to. I would just like to know that I'm prepared for it, or better prepared for it.
Yeah, I'd much rather know that they're out there and be kind of compromised than be blindly just walking through with no clue that they exist, so I feel the same way. Well, Angus, it's about time for us to get out of here, but before we do, two things. Number one, thank you so much for your service to our country. I'm so sorry to hear that you have to deal with the PTSD as a result of doing that, though. The second thing is closing comments. Do you have any you'd like to share with us?
No, sir. I just really appreciate your show. This happened back in October of 2010, and I haven't said it to anybody since it happened. So it was good to kind of get it off your chest, you know what I mean?
Oh, I do know what you mean. I'm just so glad, like I said, that you found out about the show and you decided to come on the show and do this, to put it out there for us. Well, having said that, Angus, thanks again so much for your time and coming on the show and letting us know about that experience. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks again so much. Have a great night. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.